Hello, I'm Jennifer Witt, Director of ProjectManager.com. Well, welcome to our whiteboard session today on how to keep an eye on your project critical path. The critical path is one of the strongest tools a project manager can have in their toolbox. So let's take a look and clarify what it is. If you've watched any of my other whiteboard sessions, I recommend to either Google or find a resource for a proper definition of each term. So let's look at critical path. So the critical path is the longest duration path through a network diagram and determines the shortest time to complete the project. So in essence, your project can't finish any earlier than the longest time it's going to take to get something done. So just a refresher on what a critical path or network diagram looks like, here's a network diagram. So it's activities that are networked together with different dependencies. And for each activity, there is an activity early start, late start, and so you calculate the float. So if you need a refresher on how to calculate float, then reference one of our other whiteboard sessions. But here is an example. So there's activity 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're looking at two different paths to finish something. So if we go this path, the duration of this path is 13 weeks. If we go through this path, the duration is 18 weeks. So the project can't finish any earlier than 18 weeks. So let's take a look at some of the uses for the critical path. So the critical path is going to show you how long the project will take. So this is the critical path. The float, as you remember, the float is 0 for each of these tasks. So that's what determines the critical path. So you can determine the critical path manually. If you have a short project, this is doable manually, or hopefully you have a project management tool that would do that for you. So for many activities, it will continue to calculate the critical path for you. And so this is what it looks like. The critical path will also show help you determine where to focus your project management efforts. For instance, you want to continually look at these times when things are finishing. So as people are logging time and completing tasks, you want to make sure you're keeping an eye on these activities that are on the critical path. So sometimes I'm sure you've been in meetings where maybe your stakeholders or team members are getting excited about certain tasks. Maybe equipment's not coming in on time, or you can't get the equipment, or maybe critical resources. But if they're not on this critical path, you have some leeway. So it's important to know which task you actually have float. For instance, this task has 5 weeks of float, so you have some leeway there. So I've seen sometimes where stakeholders or team members get excited about something that sounds like a big thing, but if it's not on the critical path, it's not going to impact your project. So it also helps you know where to compress the schedule. So you know if you want to make this time any shorter, you've got to find ways to compress these activities. And then it also shows you which activities actually have float. So these activities on the critical path, so there's no float, there's no leeway to get any float. You can't extend it without making the project longer. But on this one, this has a float of 5 weeks, so you do have some leeway. So these are some of the uses of the critical path. This is where and how to keep an eye on your critical path, and helps you keep your project on time within budget. If you need a tool that can help you with your critical path, then sign up for our software now at ProjectManager.com.